Jess World, the show is about to start. Jess World, it's no time to depart.
We begin with Ignino Tarchetti, an Italian writer born in 1839, part of the extreme nonconformist artist known as the Scapigliatura, which is an Italian equivalent of the French Bohemians of the time. When Tarchetti was a soldier posted in a small town, he had a love affair with a woman with epilepsy. While at this outpost, he was in the process of writing about these events in a fictionalized story, but fell very ill with tuberculosis and died at age 30. His friend Salvatore Farina completed the novel and it was released posthumously under the title Fosca, which was a fictionalized recounting of the affair he had with the unfortunate woman. Cut to 100 years later when director Ettore Scola adapts Tarchetti's Fosca into a film called Passion d'Amore, which in my opinion is a fantastic, dark, beautifully shot film that deserves a wider audience than the few people that know about it, especially for this midget. I really like this midget. Midgets aside, our good friend Stephen Sondheim saw this movie and sought out to make the film into a stage musical under the simplified name Passion. This is one of few musicals that Stephen Sondheim creatively sought out for himself. Sondheim saw the Scola film and stated in his book, Look, I Made a Hat, that by the end of the movie, the unwritten songs in my head were brimming, and I was certain of two things. First, I wanted to make it into a musical. The problem being, it couldn't be a musical, not even in my non-traditional style, because the characters are so outsized. Sondheim was attracted to the story's untraditional romance and wonderful twist on a well-known cliched story. He brought in James Lapine to write an adaptation of Scola's screenplay, and there we have Passion. The show opened on Broadway in May of 1994, starring Donna Murphy from Tangled and Spider-Man 2. The show was given generally favorable reviews, praising Sondheim's ambition to take on such a piece. However, theatergoers were absolutely repulsed by the show, particularly the titular character of Fosca. I'll dive into that later, but that was more or less what led to the show's closure in January of 1995. But what did I, Jess, the all-seeing omniscient with a heart of gold, think of this piece of Sondheim silliness? Let's find out. Number 1. The story. The story begins with an Italian military captain named Giorgio in a bed with a married woman that he's hopelessly in love with, Clara. Clara and him are completely naked in this first scene. In my video, they are covered by sheets. However, when on Broadway, these two are butt-ass naked. It's notable that every time Clara and Giorgio are together on stage, that is more or less the position they're in. These two enjoy the fucking. They really enjoy the fucking. After the smooth lovin', Giorgio is sent out to a military outpost. At his outpost, Giorgio feels like an isolated child, still butthurt over his love over a married woman. He befriends his colonel and offers to share his books with the colonel's ailing cousin, Fosca. Many weeks after the loan, Fosca works up the strength to thank Giorgio in person, revealing her to be a homely, ugly, and mentally insane woman. Giorgio attempts to befriend her, but she becomes enormously obsessive and possessive after developing romantic feelings for Giorgio, attracted not by his handsome appearance as much as their similar interests, strong personality, and kindness. Note to the ladies, that's what you're really looking for in a relationship. Giorgio spends a majority of the show trying to avoid Fosca's advances. However, despite all the time she embarrasses him and guilts him, whenever she is near death or left in the rain, he comes to her aid out of simple human decency, not love. Conversely to Clara and Giorgio's constant fucking, most of the stage time of Fosca and Giorgio is spent together talking on stage, and very intelligent conversation. Despite the very fact that the only reason they were in each other's presence is because it was guilted upon Giorgio, their conversations never particularly end well. Giorgio either leaves in a huff or Fosca passes out and or starts screaming. However, Fosca's analysis of Clara's lack of dedication to Giorgio hits him hard, causing extreme apprehension. Fosca claims she would give her life for Giorgio, and yet Clara would not even leave her husband to be with him. Oh, and he also duels with her cousin because her cousin misunderstands the whole situation. Giorgio wins the duel, however, after he takes his shot, the poor man gives out a shriek very much like Fosca's, now fated to the same lonely diseased fate as Fosca was. The final image of the play is Giorgio alone, reading the last letter from the woman he spent most of the stage time trying to avoid. And I bet you thought that Phantom was a heavy romantic musical. This makes Phantom feel rather fluff. I love the story, it's executed perfectly. The relationship between Fosca and Giorgio is both infuriating and believable. In fact, their relationship alone was what drove Sondheim to seek out the story. The use of letters to keep Giorgio and Clara communicating while giving personal commentary on the situation could have been a mess, but it overall works. The theme of love over lust is prevalent throughout the story, and the visuals also join hand in hand to make the moral hit home, like the constant fucking of Giorgio and Clara, and the constant talking of Fosca and Giorgio. After Giorgio tells Fosca his feelings, she doesn't smile, she doesn't embrace, she backs away and holds herself in fear, begging him only to repeat his love for her, hanging on to every single word of love Giorgio can share with her as she sobs, questioning if he's real or not, denying the validity of his love, until they finally embrace into some life-crippling sex. Not pretty, clean, and warm like it was with Clara, but raw, passionate, and ugly like Fosca herself. I'm so glad this musical opened up for a chance for more people to be exposed to a story that would probably go unnoticed in America without this show. I certainly wouldn't have seen the original film if this show hadn't inspired me to seek it out. How did the world react to this musical story? I guess I'm one in a major minority here, because everyone else in the world despised this musical or laughed at it. Nobody could believe that Giorgio would fall for Fosca, and everyone hated Fosca too much to relate to her. While it was on Broadway, actors were stopped on the street or on trains simply to be told how much they hated the show or the character. During previews, people would applaud whenever Fosca had a meltdown. In one performance, someone from the balcony yelled, "Die, Fosca, die!" The inappropriate reactions and laughters of the melodramatic parts caused James Lapine, the director of such family shows as Der Glockner von Notre Dame, Into the Woods, and the Annie revival, had to tell one audience member to fuck off.
I literally got up one night, walked 2 rows behind me, leaned over 3 people and told the lady, get the fuck out of the theater.
Good for you.
I said, just, you don't like it, fine, just get the fuck
get
out.
out.
The problem was there was no intermission for people who didn't like it to leave.
Right.
Yeah.
But it was so hard to be.
Did she leave?
No, she went racing to all the ushers looking for me after the show.
Jesus, this story really affected people. It was something that nobody was ready for, which shocks me to fucking hell because with musicals today being about abortions, God-questioning, and critical of modern medicine, yet this musical about an ugly woman who gets a man to love her is so unusual that it was bombarded with hate. But in the defense of the audience, people, this was a time in musical history where if there wasn't a giant centerpiece that would make you go ooh and ah, the show would be uninteresting. You had to have a giant barricade or a falling chandelier or cat makeup or a helicopter. You could not simply have a great story with beautiful music and have it work. You had to have something go on to make all those stupid idiots in the audience go, oh, this is pretty, ha. This may be the most elegant and interesting story I've ever seen in a musical, aside from maybe Sweeney Todd. And it's a very strong story, and I adore it all. Overall, the story gets a 5 out of 5. Number 2, the characters. The characters are sparse, and I'm just going to talk about the 3 mains, Clara, Giorgio, and Fosca. Clara is the beautiful and sexual goddess that Giorgio believes he is in love with. Despite Clara being an adulterous slut, she has the air of class around her that makes her hard to despise. However, to me it seems like Giorgio is nothing to her but a simple fuck toy. She throws around words like love and happiness, however she cannot do simple bare necessities for Giorgio, like leaving her husband for him and dedicating to him completely. Clara has more sins on her roster than Fosca does, which leads me to ask, why don't more people hate Clara like they do Fosca? Clara simply passively loves Giorgio, but Fosca is driven into passionate obsession over her love for Giorgio. Giorgio is one of the most interesting characters with very little depth. He's pretty bland, but the way he handles situations around him are actually pretty interesting. He doesn't immediately try to avoid Fosca, he was always kind and polite to her, much like how one treats a mentally handicapped person who fancies them. How does one exactly handle that situation without coming off as a monster? In the stage musical, Giorgio is rather stoic and overly serious, a bit too saint-like, like an Italian Valjean. Because of his immense seriosity in the musical, his head over heels infatuation with Clara makes him seem really dense. However, his relationship with Fosca seems very much expanded in the musical, and his relationship and growth to her actually feels really genuine. And here we have Fosca, the most polarizing and titular character in the musical. Fosca is meant to be hideous looking, but the choice of Donna Murphy to play her is not actually ideal, seeing as Donna Murphy is actually pretty goddamn beautiful. According to Sondheim, she got the role through her fantastic audition with Fosca's song, I Read, where her obsession simply bled to the back of the theater. And if one watches Donna perform this role, her beauty is completely overshadowed by her obsession and, well, passion. When asked later about how she related to Fosca so much, she spoke of how there was an incident in her adolescence that rang completely true to Fosca's character, which caused Donna Murphy to completely relate to Fosca instantaneously. According to Sondheim, the relationship was very apparent for over 280 performances. I'm really surprised that more females don't worship Fosca like they do Eponine, Mrs. Lovett, or Elphaba. I mean, Fosca is more or less the epitome of everything a modern female is on the internet. If you forgive my broad generalization, Fosca is essentially a Tumblr nerd. It is a catharsis to see such a pitiful character be loved by the one she's obsessed over for over 2 hours. No matter how much you may have despised her, it still touches your heart to see her become loved, because we all have been head over heels in love with somebody that had no interest whatsoever. And if we pull a Fosca and live vicariously through her in this moment, your life is made a little bit better. What's amazing about the characters in this musical is also likely why so many people are so hostile towards it. In an example of the lady doth protest too much, the audience simply identified with these characters to a point that it was uncomfortable. A violent reaction to the sad fact that we are all Giorgio, we are all Clara, and we all, of course, are Fosca. The characters get a 4 out of 5. Number 3, the songs. Alright, the songs in this show aren't exactly traditional. It is more like scenes set to music. The album credits each song is like Scene 69 or First Letter or The Flashback. But here are the 4 actual individual song pieces in this show.
So much happiness.
So beautiful.
Happiness. This song is the introduction of Giorgio and Clara naked, screwing on stage while singing. That's more or less all there is to the song. Aside from that, it serves nothing but as a motif to connect all of Clara and Giorgio's scenes together. It's serviceable for that job, but I will never seek this song out as something I would listen to.
That doesn't mean I love you.
That doesn't mean I love you.
I wish I could forget you. This is the titular moment of the show where Fosca, convinced she's dying, begs Giorgio to dictate a letter, manipulating him into writing a reasonable confession of love to her, with his signature at the bottom. Giorgio concedes under the belief that she's close to death. The letter speaks of affection, but not love. This is Fosca's fantasy that she wishes Giorgio would feel for her, to live vicariously in a fantasy world where Giorgio might actually write these words to her. This is possibly my second favorite piece in the entire show, and is possibly the closest thing to a hit song the show had.
You are why I live.
Loving You. This is one of the latest additions to the show, with Sondheim's intention of adding it being a passive-aggressive attempt to spoon-feed the subtleties of the musical to the audience that was completely despising the show up to this point. The song exists to explain why Fosca was so obsessed with Giorgio, which more or less could have gone unsaid. However, if Sondheim hadn't written this song, the world would be rid of an absolutely fantastic piece of music. The song is absolutely wonderful, and Donna Murphy's execution of the song is perfect. Despite its mild redundancy, I love this song.
Love within reason, that isn't love. And I've learned that from you.
Just another love story / no one has ever loved me. I love this sequence of 2 songs linked together as Giorgio's rejection of Clara's love and retaliation of Fosca's love. His love confession to Fosca is possibly the most wonderful blend of music and lyrics I've seen in so long. And the romance that ensues afterwards into Fosca's orgasm is a perfect bookend to where I consider the logical ending of the story is. I know there's an epilogue, but in my opinion, this is where the show ends. The music and passion is tied with Sweeney Todd as Sondheim's best score for a stage musical. However, there are no real musical numbers as much as song segments, so I can't exactly praise the music as completely perfect. Overall, the songs get a 4 out of 5. To conclude, Passion is one of the most underrated pieces of theater I've ever had the pleasure of being involved in my life, and overall, it gets a 5 out of 5. I'm Jess, now go fuck yourself.